Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar with Intellum. I'm joined today by Vanessa Alzate, who is the CEO of Kirkpatrick Partners. And before I, let Vanessa introduce herself and share more just around the Kirkpatrick model, how it's changing, how you can use it to measure the impact of your learning programs, I just want to go through some brief housekeeping here. First of all, this webinar is being recorded, so if you want to come back to it, if you have to jump off halfway, if you want to share it with a friend, you will get a recording of the webinar delivered to your email inbox after the webinar is over. We will be taking questions during this webinar, so if you have a question, go ahead and submit it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So that'll just help us to track those questions as the webinar goes, and it'll just streamline everything there. With that said, though, the chat is open, so if you want to go ahead, introduce yourself, let us know that you're here, tell us where you're calling in from. We'd love to hear from you. I know, Vanessa, you and I did this, I can't recall if it was last summer or the summer before, but I know Vanessa's like a very engaging speaker, would love to hear from you. So please go ahead. You can just let us know in the webinar chat that we're over there. And then one final thing is that at the end of this webinar, you'll get a survey. So it'll just pop up in your screen when you close the Zoom window. If you can just take a moment to complete that survey, that's really helpful to us. It helps us to know what you liked, what you want to hear more of, topics that are top of mind for you, things that you're interested in learning about on Intellum's webinars. And we use all of that data, all of that information, same way that you would use it for your education programs, just to inform what are we doing and what do we want to do more of. So without much further ado, I want to go ahead and let Vanessa introduce herself. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because Vanessa, I know you have your own slides, and we will go from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Shannon, for having me, and thank you, Intellum, for having me back. And thank you all for being here on, is it Thursday? It's Thursday. Y'all, it's been a week. It's spring break here in Florida, so the kids have been on spring break. Luckily, my parents came down and as I tagged my mother in with the quickness to manage the children. Actually, I see there's a Giselle here. One of my daughters is named Giselle. And, spring break, it's quite the time as a working parent. So thank you all again for having me. I am going to go ahead and share my screen before I forget, because I have actually done that where I did not share my screen for an entire presentation. Awesome. So love seeing where everyone is here, where everyone is from. I see we've got some international folks that are here, so thank you all for joining. I know it's probably a little bit later for you all in the evening. Like I said, I am down in Florida. Today, I'm closer to the West Coast by Naples, but typically, I live over on the East Coast by Boca Raton, where it seems like all of New York and New Jersey has transplanted, but I'm from New Jersey, so no one is surprised by that. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the new Kirkpatrick model. So for over the last 60 years, the Kirkpatrick model has shaped how organizations evaluate training. And I'd love if you would pop into the chat for me. This is very helpful for me. How many of y'all are familiar with the Kirkpatrick model? And if you are, I would love to kind of know, are you currently like which levels are you currently measuring? I'm getting some thumbs up. Love it. Somewhat familiar. Giselle, this is what you are here for. Use it extensively, preteen. Great. A lot of levels 1 and 2. Anyone measuring level 3 or 4 behavior or results? Nice, Jenny. So Jenny says she's familiar and they do levels 3 and 4. Amazing. We've attempted. We're gonna attempt again. It's gonna be great. Use a lot. We use it to frame training, impact, and explain to senior leadership. Awesome. Well, this is great. Thank you so much. I'd love to just kind of see where everyone is at when it comes to the model. So like I mentioned, so for over 60 years, the Kirkpatrick model has been the standard for learning and development. Truly the gold star here. But the reality is most organizations are still using it like it's 1995. Now, I am not home or in my office, or else you would see I have a love for the 90s. I have a Dylan McKay doll in my background usually, and some other fun trinkets. So I do love the 90s. However, there's some parts of it that probably should stay there, like the clip art. Remember the clip art icon and things like that? Probably needs to stay over there. Most organizations are also still tracking activity only. They're reporting participation. They're sharing data, but they're not actually influencing decisions. And I know for a lot of us in the learning space, we talk about wanting to shift from being an order taker to a strategic business partner or a performance consultant. And for many of us, we just don't have that language or that ability to do so just yet or understand how. And this has been the shift that we've been working on in Kirkpatrick. And the fact is, if we're still only measuring using activity, reporting participation, or lack of sharing data, we have a problem. And so today's session is about this one thing, moving from vanity metrics to performance intelligence. So I know we talked a little bit about kind of like some of the levels that you all are currently measuring. So in the chat, or if you just want to reflect for a moment, what is your team currently reporting to leadership? What are some of those metrics that you're currently reporting? And excuse me if I look over to your left, maybe my right, I threw the chat over here. Is anyone measuring completion rates? Okay, here we go. Attendance, satisfaction, assessment scores, course completion. Trevor, all good. You have to know who completed the course. Business impact when we can. Often the pre-data doesn't exist. Totally understand. I actually have a very spicy take on baseline data and pilots or like control groups. Attendance survey results. Bethany, I love the transparency, vanity metrics. So I would love to learn from you all. How many of you believe that any of these actually change executive decisions? Not many, yeah. So what's funny is I had a customer, actually probably around this time last year. It was a new director to her organization, or a new VP to her organization, and she was meeting with her boss, and she said, my boss said to me, can you please stop reporting number of training hours that y'all have facilitated or created this year? And she's like, sure, no problem. That's not, you don't want to hear about that, but could you tell me why? And he said, because every time I see the number of training hours, I wonder how many of those were actually necessary. And I'm just starting to calculate, how much time out of the field and things like that, and what sales we could have, is a sales organization, what sales we could have been making during that time. And it was like the moment that it kind of clicked more for me, where for that organization, for that department, knowing about your NPS scores, knowing about number of training hours completed, that makes us feel really, really good, right? It tells us about all of the hard work that we've done. But it doesn't actually influence any decisions, and it's not aligned to what stakeholders need. And at the end of the day, that information, while it might make us feel good, it's not intelligence. It's actually noise. Now, leaders are not asking truly if people like the training or how many training hours you've developed this year. But they are asking one thing. Did the training that you create actually work? And what they really mean by that, so I don't love the did it work question because I think it's a very complex answer, but what they really mean by that is, did performance improve? Did risk decrease? Did revenue increase? Or did something meaningful change? And when we can't answer those questions, we lose influence. Now, this is the cycle that most of organizations are stuck in. And I have been there. Trust me, I have been there myself as a practitioner. They plan for the training, they deliver it, they move on, and then they panic when someone asks for impact. Has this been anybody else? Please tell me I'm not the only one that has been in this cycle. I'll take like a thumbs up or any sort of reaction. Okay, thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. Yeah. The problem is when we treat training in this way, evaluation becomes reactive after the fact and defensive. Now, this is not a model problem. This is actually a systems problem. Here's what's really happening. So on one side, what we report is completion, attendance, number of hours, satisfaction, scores. But on the other side, what leaders need is performance change, behavior adoption, business outcomes. And that gap between those two things is where credibility is all lost. Doesn't mean though that that information, at those vanity metrics is not important to know. It's just not important to report up to the executive level. It's helpful for us as the learning function to improve in what it is that we're doing and to get a read. I'll talk a little bit more about the model in a moment. But we don't need to report that up, like I mentioned. Most of what we've been reporting are truly vanity metrics. They show activity, but not impact. So if vanity metrics aren't enough, then what replaces them? And this is where we talk about performance intelligence. Performance intelligence is not a dashboard. It's not a report. It's not a tool. It's the ability to continuously answer these three questions. What performance needs to change? What behaviors drive that performance? And what are the outcomes that we are looking to achieve? And this is what the Kirkpatrick model, when applied correctly, actually enables. Level 4 defines the result. Level 3 defines the behavior. And the environment explains what's helping or blocking. And then your data becomes a navigation system, not an after-action report. What evidence tells us if we're not on track early enough so that we could adjust. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of the Kirkpatrick model, because again, the model has evolved over time and we have the newest iteration now. So Dr. Don Kirkpatrick, for those of you who are not as familiar, he introduced the model in the 1950s. 1954 was when he actually started his dissertation. And so what Don was actually doing, so he was actually a supervisory training at the University of Wisconsin, and he wanted to know whether or not his training was working. And he came across the work of Dr. Raymond Katzel and used that as inspiration to identify these buckets of data that he was going to collect. So their reaction, what did they learn, did behavior change, and then the ultimate results in the organization. So then ASTD, what we now know as ATD, the Association for Talent Development, they came to him and said, hey, we have this magazine and we would love to know, we'd love to hear more about your work. Would you mind writing an article for us? And in true Don fashion, he said, I'll do you one better. I will write 4. One on reaction, learning, behavior, and results. And from there, the industry actually took those 4 articles and coined it the Kirkpatrick model. And next thing you knew, Don had this business creating this Kirkpatrick model. Now, someone also named them levels and someone put them into the triangle. Don never did those things. So it's always something that we talk about and we actually look fondly on when it comes to the model, is how truly the industry and the community has influenced the model and the evolutions of it. Now, in 2008, Dr. Jim Kirkpatrick, John's son, and Wendy Kaiser Kirkpatrick, John's daughter-in-law, modernized it, really focusing more on starting with level 4, on level 3 behaviors, and really this concept of monitoring and adjusting. And really started to talk more about the business partnerships actually needed in order to achieve evaluation results. And now the newest evolution expands it beyond training and into a performance system. So briefly, just want to share a little bit of who I am. So I am the new owner and CEO of Kirkpatrick Partners. I also own an instructional design agency, Anchored Training. That is a QR code to my LinkedIn. Please Connect with me on LinkedIn. I love staying in touch with community, chatting in all the posts and the DMs and all of that, and learning more about what you all need. Truly, when we talk about community, like I am a girl all about community. So please scan that and connect with me at your convenience. I've been in the learning world since 2009. Started off as a software trainer in the private sector, and then worked in a lot of different industries, including the public sector. Like I mentioned, I'm a New Jersey native who migrated down to South Florida probably a few years earlier than most of us do, but I was really tired of shoveling snow. And I don't know if she's here, but I do know one of your customers, Shannon, is actually someone that would know this fun fact very, very well. So my most memorable concert was a private Snoop Dogg concert in Mexico with a company holiday party. And actually, one of your customers was there, right there beside me. We worked together at this organization and had a great time watching Snoop Dogg. So that, if you love to tell me, yeah, I'm not convinced guessing who it was. So if you'd love to tell me your fun fact, maybe your first concert, your most memorable, I would love to hear it. But I say all this to say I acquired Kirkpatrick Partners in 2023. And the work that I was doing at Anchored, a lot of the learning strategy work, I leveraged the Kirkpatrick model for because it was simple and it was flexible. No matter the organization I was working with, the model just fit. And there was no need for math anxiety, and it was really focused on, more about outcomes and behaviors and not necessarily what's a financial calculation. Because for some of my organizations that I worked with, like the Department of Human Services in Philadelphia, they didn't care necessarily about a financial ROI. They want to know how many more children are safer because of the work that we're doing, because we're better training our social workers. We do a lot of work now with the Department of Defense. They're not necessarily calculating a financial ROI. Now, while they do need to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, what they're really concerned about is keeping America safe and keeping their warfighters safe. And so that's where the model really helps to be that model that can fit no matter the organization. And also, it was the model that I used to actually influence the way that I designed training. So if you are familiar with the ADDIE model, analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate, my girl Addie, love her, but that E being at the end is truly a challenge, because that E being at the end for many organizations signals, oh, it's the last thing that we do, we evaluate. The fact is that E needs to come up to the beginning, and we need to know what that level 4 result is that we're looking for to be able to then drive the rest of the process. Because when I know what result is that we're looking for, and then I can identify the behaviors that I need in order to influence those level 4 results, then I can dive into understanding more where their gaps are, doing more strategic analysis, and design the right intervention to ensure that we are not designing solutions for just knowledge sake and just information dumps, but we're designing solutions for performance. And so now this is the next iteration of the Kirkpatrick model. So maybe in 10 years when someone else buys the company, they'll have their own version, and I'll be the third piece of the timeline. But we've evolved the model to look at it not linearly, but more as a system. Because like I mentioned, if level 4 isn't clear, level 3 won't be clear. And if level 3 is not defined, level 2 actually doesn't matter. And this is not evaluation mechanics, it's strategic alignment. Now let's be honest. Most teams are using the model, but they're not getting results. And here's why. They treat evaluation and this process as linear. They start with level 1, they measure only training, not the environment, and they try to prove ROI instead of showing contribution. And this is why evaluation tends to stay tactical instead of becoming influential. But when you can do backwards planning, this is where that shift begins to happen. See, most organizations, like I mentioned, will design starting at analysis and go to evaluate. And actually, if we're all honest on this webinar, and I feel like we're friendly enough as a group that we can be honest, we probably start at like halfway through design and develop and deliver it and implement. But if we're following the full process, we'll start at analysis and then end at evaluation. But the model is all about planning backwards, starting at level 4, defining the ultimate outcome that you are looking for, the ultimate result, and really spending time with stakeholders, understanding what is it exactly that we're looking for and what is the problem. Then defining the critical behaviors, then designing the right solutions to ensure you're building capability and readiness, and then ensuring the experience is supportive and conducive to the outcomes that you're looking for. And when you begin to design with the end in mind, you design for performance and not participation. So let's go over the levels, because the definitions have changed just a little bit. So level 4 is the degree to which targeted outcomes occur as a result of an experience or initiative and performance support. See, this is the result leadership actually cares about. But here's the truth most people miss. Level 4 is actually not hard because of the data. Because the data exists somewhere. It's hard because of partnerships. So you need access to business data, to stakeholders, to shared definitions of success. And when we start to talk about evaluation and data sharing, in a siloed organization where we're all evaluating using our own metrics and our own methods, it becomes hard to say, hey, do you mind sharing that data with me? Because a lot of times departments will kind of like hold on to it really tightly and say, what are you doing with this data? This is my data, this is ours. Why do you need this? And never actually release it. And here's the key shift with level 4. Results are not caused by training alone. They're influenced by systems, leadership, and the environment. And that is contributive thinking, not attribution. Level 3 is the pivot point. This is the degree to which the target audience performs the critical behaviors in its environment and is supported in and accountable for its performance. See, results change because behaviors change. And behaviors change when they are clearly defined, they are supported, and they are reinforced. And this is actually where most evaluation fails. Because if we measure if people learned, but not whether they can actually apply what they've learned. This might be the most important concept to the model and the biggest change that we've made. The performance environment makes or breaks impact. So the performance environment is the setting in which critical behaviors will be performed. So it includes tangible factors like resources, opportunity to apply, the time from when they actually learn something to apply that skill, and managerial and peer support, as well as cultural elements like motivation or drive, recognition, psychological safety, and organizational norms. See, if people don't have the time, tools, manager support, or psychological safety, nothing's going to change. I'll give you an example. So at Kirkpatrick Partners, we do a lot of certification programs. And we do not control, obviously, the organization that our participants go back to, right? And so what happens is, an organization will send an employee to our certification program, and they are basically, saying, hey, let's transform this employee, let's let them learn all these new skills, and when they come back, they're going to transform the entire organization. Now, maybe if they're like a one-person shop and it's their consulting organization, they have that ability. When we're talking about these huge organizations, federal government agencies, defense agencies, all of these big organizations with so much politics and bureaucracies and cultural norms, that one person is not going to change how everything is actually done. And what you actually do is this, it's like this phenomenon, which we call like the fishbowl phenomenon, where you actually take the fish out of the fishbowl and you like clean it all up and you make it shiny and teach it some new tricks, but you didn't clean the fishbowl, and to take the fish and you put it back into the fishbowl and they get dirty again. And you're surprised at why they got dirty again so quickly. And it's because they just don't have the right environment in order to grow. One more analogy for analogy's sake. You should know that this analogy isn't exactly reflective of me, but I have no green thumb. But what I do know is that if I'm going to plant a seed or plant a flower, the soil in which I plant it in has to be right. It has to be healthy. It has to be good in order for that seed or that plant to thrive. That is the same concept when it comes to training. Too often what we're seeing is folks will come from training, and then we put them back into an environment that isn't conducive. And oftentimes, you don't have a training problem. What you have is actually a systems problem. But what we don't do is measure the environment to see what we may need to address in order to fix the entire problem. Oh, you know what? Sorry. I just wanted to quickly ask, are there any questions at this point on levels 4 through 3? You can, again, pop them into the Q&A, pop them into the chat. And I would actually also love to hear from you all. What's the number one thing that's blocking behavior change in your organization? Time and alignment. Yeah, fair. Absolutely. I think everyone wants a lot of training in a very short amount of time. Time allocation. Adherence to the way we've always done it. Britt, I hear that very, very much. Manager buy-in. Yeah. Conflicting priorities, lack of buy-in. Yeah. You know, a lot of organizations will say, well, like, who's done this right? You know, like, who's done this well to me? And I'll say, you know, honestly, the ones that have done it well are organizations that have the desire from all angles. So when we talk about buy-in, it's not just about top-down buy-in or bottom-up buy-in. It's like top-down, bottom-up, side to side. Everyone has to be committed to this cultural change. And you know, so I'll share it with you all at the end, but I've got a new book coming out. It's the next book in the Kirkpatrick series. It showcases the model, and it showcases this concept of building a culture, what's called building culture evaluation. But how do you build a culture of evaluation? Yesterday, I had a webinar with our community, and I said, you know, people and organizations believe, maybe, I don't know if they believe it, but they want to believe that culture shifts take a year to do, right? They set the intention in January, like your New Year's resolution, and then by December, our entire organization should shift. But true culture work takes a good 5 to 10 years to actually do and implement and integrate into an organization. Because of all of that top-down, side-to-side, bottom-up buy-in work and alignment that you have to do, and you have to build in the repetition and essentially, you know, how the brain works, right? When you have to rewire your brain out of a bad habit, you have to rewire the brain of your organization in order to think differently and away from this is how we've always done it. But what organizations need is short wins to see that, okay, progress is happening. I don't know about you, I'm a to-do list person. And when I put a to-do list together, I like to also include things I've already done to get that satisfaction of crossing something off and knowing I've made some progress in my day. Organizations are like that too. And they need proof. You know, everyone is concerned and challenged by being the first one, the early adopter. They don't want to stick their neck out on a new way of doing things. And we've got to address all of these things to actually see things change. But the fact of the matter is, like, organizations are changing quicker than, I think we're all ready for, right? The way that AI is changing how we work and how we function is just way too rapid. Even for us, I've created chatbots and all of these different tools that you don't know me well, but you should know that I'm not a coder by any way, shape, or form. But I've been able to create automations in our organization to streamline and to become more efficient, to put my people in places where they are in their zone of genius so that they're maximizing their work, and we're maximizing the work that they do and their hours and the return. People have to see that in order to be bought in. Awesome. Well, thank you all. If there's any questions, again, please feel free to pop them into the chat as I move on to level 2. So level 2 is about capability and readiness. Do they know it? Can they do it? Do they believe in it? Will they try it? But the fact is, learning alone will not drive results. So the updated definition for level 2 is the degree to which the target audience acquires the intended knowledge, skills, attitude, confidence, and commitment necessary to achieve targeted outcomes. See, gaining knowledge and skills is great, but the fact is that you actually need to work more on working on attitude, confidence, and commitment to actually see behavior change. And at KP, what we talk about confidence and commitment questions, we call them level 2.5 questions behind the scenes, because these are our questions that will predict what is going to happen when they're back into the environment. And I can tell you, if there's a confidence and commitment issue, likely there's an issue in the environment that's affecting that confidence and commitment. Now, level 1, the most evaluated level and one of the most misunderstood. It's truly not about happiness, although everyone calls it the smile sheet level. It is about alignment. Did the experience support the work that matters so that they can feel prepared in order to execute when they're back on the job? So level 1 is the degree to which the target audience finds an experience or initiative engaging, relevant, and supportive of the work needed to achieve targeted outcomes. Two big things here if you're newer to the Kirkpatrick model. One, relevancy is probably, out of the 4, I would say the most important of the 4. It's the WIFM, what's in it for me, right? Raise your hand if you've ever been part of a training where you've walked out and been, or even during it, you're like, why am I here? This is not applicable to me. I don't really understand what I'm doing here. I know I cannot be the only one. Yep, thank you. Relevancy is important, because if, I might be part of a great training and I might be engaged and I might have a great time. I might really like the facilitator. But if I didn't actually think, identify how this is going to make my life better, easier, or anything like that, more productive, in one ear, out the other, I've got a lot of things I've got to keep in this brain. And also, the change is also supportive to the work, right? Was this training actually going to support the work that I do? And the fact is, an experience can be not fun, and I may not like a certain experience, and yet that may be an experience that I learn a ton from, and more from, than experiences where I really liked experiences where I really liked the experience. Say experience one more time. And even questions about facilitators, if you have them in your surveys, we actually recommend taking those out. Participants should not evaluate facilitators. They can provide general feedback, and we do have 1 or 2 questions that we'll ask about our facilitators, but we really don't do more, because participants just don't have the qualifications to know what to look for. So we recommend a dedicated observer when you're going to evaluate a facilitator. And trust me, if there is an issue, yes, Giselle, I can make sure we PDF and send this over to Shannon to share out. If there is an issue with a facilitator, you will find out. That comment box where it's like, anything else you want to let me know, they will let you know. So don't be afraid that you will be missing out on any sort of information. Now, the next big change to the Kirkpatrick universe and model is that we don't just report on one metric, ROI. We actually tell a story of return. And this is return on expectations, ROE. So because I put this training plus performance support tools, and we've looked at the environment, because I put this whole package together to address the problem, what do you expect is going to come out on the other side? This is where you'll hear things like, increase in sales, employee engagement scores going up, employee turnover decreasing, retention increasing, those sorts of things. But we also tell a story of return on performance. Because for a lot of organizations, like I mentioned, military, child services, family services, things like that, it's more than just dollars and cents. It's about the behavior, actually people, saving lives and all of those things. And actually, we've had folks use the Kirkpatrick model to evaluate things like natural resource usage and things that don't even have human interventions. You can read more about that in the book when it comes out. But then we've got this third piece, contributive ROI, or contribution to business results. Because the fact is, this one training, this is what we try to do, right? We try to tie this one training program to an end business result. But the fact is, most things are not affected because of this one training program. It's part of a constellation of factors that actually contribute to the business result. The economic environment, right? What's happening in the world around us? That needs to be part of ROI calculations. Again, the factors in the performance environment, things like manager support and things like that. Another piece is that we didn't talk about at level 3 is the performance support. So in Kirkpatrick, we believe in designing not just training solutions, but performance support. So what are the things that we need in order to reinforce, reward, and encourage the behaviors to continue to happen? And these may be things like job aids, checklists, having the standard operating procedure handy. Might be nudges. Coaching is a very big one. We did an impact study with the Department of Defense on their coaching program, and it returned like a 19-to-1 return. So they really are doing coaching as like one of their greatest pieces. And we're actually right now evaluating their mentoring program to do a compare and contrast between coaching and mentoring, which is pretty cool. So coaching is a big one. How are we rewarding folks? All rewards do not need to be monetary. They could be things like just a simple shout out on your company, Slack or Teams channel, giving someone, an extra day off, or just time with an executive. There are things that you can do in order to reward the behavior and create a little bit of FOMO for those that are not being shouted out. Now, this combination of return can give leaders confidence. That one number of ROI doesn't give leaders enough confidence. And the reason for that is because, again, they even know it's not just training that contributes to that end result. And if we put a number and a dollar amount on training alone, without looking at all of the other contributing factors, it's so easy to poke holes, right, in that ROI calculation. And if any of you all are familiar with Dr. Keith Keating, he wrote the book, The Trusted Learning Advisor, and he wrote, his newest book is called Hidden Value. His dissertation was actually interviewing CFOs on the concept of training ROI. And what he found was most of those CEOs did not want the training department to come to them with an ROI calculation. They wanted them to come with stories, with all the things that they're not going to have general access to, they don't hear. Because that is what they actually need to know. the ROI, we know it's hard to calculate. And frankly, we also know that we probably calculate ROI differently than you do. And it's just not, they'll poke a bunch of holes in your ROI calculation. And that's one where it might be better to, if you do need to have that financial ROI, you guys work hand in hand. You bring them that contributive ROI and you work hand in hand on working on the financial calculation. When you can have those three and you have that confidence that you can provide leaders, that is where you have credible evidence. Now, at this point, most organizations try to solve this problem by collecting more data. I'm going to tell you, you do not need another dashboard. You do not need another survey. Please do not do another survey. You don't need more reports. More data is not going to solve this problem. The problem is that most organizations don't have a system for turning data into decisions. And this is where we see that there is this gap where people know the Kirkpatrick model, they know how to evaluate. But where they struggle is actually applying it and learning from others in order to apply at those higher levels, right? They're, again, starting at level 1 and 2. Yet we know at Kirkpatrick, if you're going to start at level 1 and 2, you're never going to get to level 4. You've got to plan backwards and execute bottom to top. And then the last gap is leading and influencing with the model and being able to tell stories of impact with the data that they have. And I want to leave you with this. We need to stop just providing reports. We need to start leading our organizations in order to provide them with the information that they need to make better decisions. Love me some Tableau, love me some Power BI. But just when I look at a report with no information of what I can do with this data, it oftentimes leaves me with more questions than answers. And it's important for us to be able to provide that interpretation. When we only provide reports, facts, figures, numbers, pretty graphs, we leave it up to the person who's receiving that report to interpret what to do with it. And because they don't have the same background that we do in learning, it becomes very difficult for them to shift to a more performance solution or to understand how they could be doing better. So they go back to the way they've always done things. So my recommendation for you is presenting your data, presenting your solution and providing reports and then saying, okay, based on these things, here are recommendations. When you can show up like that, you show up as a performance consultant, you show up as a strategic business partner, all the things that you want to work towards, and shift away from that order taking. And for a lot of executives, they're kind of happy with that because they do not want to make another decision. They have decision fatigue. I am one of them. Do not ask me what I want, where I want to go for dinner. Just tell me what you want, and I will probably find something on the menu that I can eat. I do not want to make a decision. And so with my team, I even train them to do this as well. Hey guys, when you're working on something and you want to, don't just come to me with the problem. Just don't just come to me with a report. Come to me with, here's what the report is telling us. This is what I'm seeing. Here's 3 solutions. Pick the one that you want. I've done all the vetting and all of those things. And that's how they're able to manage up and help to move to that leadership role. And so I want you to take a moment to write down, whether it's in your phone, on your computer, or in a sticky note, what's one concrete conversation that you'll initiate within 30 days that is going to strengthen this need for aligning your organization with evaluation. I want you to look at that, write today's date on it. 30 days from now, well, 1 month from now is April 19th, my grandmother's birthday, rest in peace. Okay, so it's a very special day for all of us. I want you to look at that on April 19th. And did you have that conversation? If you connect with me on LinkedIn, I want you to tell me about it and how it went. But I want you to have this conversation over the next 30 days. You have to take that first step in order to lead and scale evaluation at Kirkpatrick, with Kirkpatrick. But if you want to lead it at Kirkpatrick, let me